Personal chemistry between leaders shapes history as much as impersonal forces. Russian and American may have been separated once by ideology, but they face the same big power problems today. So, is there a meeting of minds, or at least mindsets, when leaders meet? Join me, Jan Darash, for How We Got Here.
Relations between U.S. presidents and Soviet, then Russian leaders varied. That of Ronald Reagan and Mikhail Gorbachev resulted in bringing down walls, destroying an evil empire, and making the world more connected for a while. With communism buried under the wall's rubble, U.S. President George H.W. Bush and his Russian counterpart Boris Yeltsin met in February 1992, declaring a new era of friendship and partnership. In January 1993, they shook hands over START II, a bilateral treaty that provided for further nuclear arms reductions. The happy streak continued under Democrat Bill Clinton. His tenure saw a dozen major understandings, including halting the sale of Russian rocket parts to India, the removal of Soviet-era nuclear missiles from Ukraine in exchange for Russian assurance of Ukraine's sovereignty and security, the withdrawal of Russian troops from the Baltic states, NATO expansion, and more. Clinton's relations with Yeltsin soured from 1997 as NATO's plan to welcome new members angered Russia. Moscow's fears of NATO expansion became ripe ground for the rise of Vladimir Putin, who would later say that the dismantling of the Soviet Union was Russia's shameful failure and a great tragedy. The years that followed under George W. Bush saw tensions grow between the White House and Red Square, first over the 2003 invasion of Iraq, which Russia condemned. Moscow saw U.S. efforts to drill Central Asian oil and natural gas as a possibly unfriendly wedging into Russia's sphere of influence. The Kremlin slammed the U.S. for encouraging anti-Russian upheavals during the Rose Revolution in Georgia in 2003, and the Orange Revolution in Ukraine in 2004. In 2007, the U.S. announced it would build an anti-ballistic missile defense system in Poland, which Moscow viewed as a potential threat. Next year, Russia announced that if such a system was deployed near the Russian border, it would have to react militarily. The recognition of Kosovo's independence from Serbia in February 2008 by the U.S., the Russian invasion of Georgia the same year, Moscow's fostering of the separatist revolts in eastern Ukraine in 2014, and the Russian annexation of Crimea further ate away at the already strained relations. During his term in office, Barack Obama aimed for a reset in U.S.-Russian relations. But following the mass protests that began in Russia in the wake of the legislative election in early December 2011, Putin, then the Russian Prime Minister, blasted the U.S. with accusations of interference and inciting unrest. Obama and Putin did not find common ground in the context of the civil war in Syria either. The reset was undone. A week into Trump's term, Trump had Putin on the line in January 2017 for nearly an hour. The talk was hailed by both governments as a step toward improvement of relations. The two met personally for talks in Finland's Helsinki in July 2018, and they had a ball. But U.S.-Russian relations under Trump were not free from friction. In March 2018, Trump ordered the expulsion of 60 Russian diplomats and the closure of a Russian consulate in Seattle in a show of support for the UK's position on the attempted assassination of Sergei Skripal, a former Russian military officer and double agent for the British intelligence agencies. Trump would also impose sanctions on businesses involved in the construction of the Nord Stream 2 natural gas pipeline from Russia to Germany. This cooled U.S.-Russian relations, which some analysts suggest may experience a thaw during Trump's second term.
I'm delighted to be joined by Professor Agnieszka Legutska from the Polish Institute of International Affairs. Welcome to the program.
Welcome too, and thank you for having me here.
Great to have you. You've not been with us for a while, so it's wonderful to have you once more.
Some busy things to do.
Good. we're talking about the personal interaction between a Russian or a Soviet-era president and an American president. Do you see any differences as you look upon the history of these summit meetings, these one-on-one occasions? Do you see any differences in their approaches, or are they just two very powerful men dividing up the rest of the world?
Usually that were men.
Yes,
yeah. Quite powerful. I don't see many things that Americans could get right, Soviet leaders. Maybe because of the beginning, I would say that Churchill was better to understand Stalin and his behavior and his challenges and the challenges that Soviet Union is having. I think, and when I look at the history of a relationship between US and Soviet Union, and especially Russian Federation, we have like the first moment of willingness to have better relations, or like warming relations, or to improve something. But then it occurred that at the end of the day, the US and Soviets and US and Russian Federation has different strategies, different interests in the world. And at the end of the day, they were confronting with each other rather to having better relations. And no matter what kind of leaders we had in the history, that kind of confrontational element was on agenda. Some warm things or warm feelings were between, for example, I don't know, I think the best between Boris Yeltsin in Russia and Bill Clinton in the 90s at the beginning.
Lubricated by vast amounts of vodka?
Vodka can be an
diplomacy,
element, yes, of the approaching to Boris Yeltsin. However, they were having also a kind of a common sense of humor, not only because of alcohol, but also because of new opening, I would say. You know, there wasn't hopes that the Soviet Union collapsed and Russian Federation, and democratic how it was, he was perceived in the US and maybe in the other parts of the world, that Boris Yeltsin can change Russia to democracy. Others did not have such optimism anymore. Even Vladimir Putin.
Such as who? Who was a more realistic negotiator with the Russians?
When it comes to Soviet time, I would say Kennedy and then Ronald Reagan, definitely. The idea of the Emperor of Evil, how he was also joking on a Soviet Union and the famous joke on plumber. Yes. And those things that he could understand, and also bluff Soviet Union at some point, that US are having, you know, Star Wars costs and possibility to hit Russian, at that time Soviet Union. They've made Russia to came into the arms race. And that was too much for the economy of Soviet Union. At some point, that brought Soviet Union for the collapse. And after the 90s, the most I don't know actually which president was the least who understood Putin and the system. I would say Joe Biden was the one, because he had that experience of long time dealing with Soviet and then Russia, and he had understanding that Russia is the challenge, is the threat, and we need to somehow can't react on him.
But there was also, as you said earlier, there's an idealism on the part of the Americans, where they want to introduce values and world-based rules, order, that kind of stuff. And the Russians seem to be, Soviets seem to be far more hard-headed. The power people there.
Yes, definitely. The Americans and Russians are maybe on the same planet in the sense how they see the power, how Jonah was saying that the soft power and hard power, which countries are using which one. So to understand Russia, we need to see that if you have a hammer, then all the problems looks like nails. And that's the thing that was perceived US and Russia also. For the technical reasons, Russia did not have for many years the hammer because it was too fragile, economy was too disturbed, and then only now we are seeing that Russia is going in the direction that the use of force is something that can push others to be respected, to see Russia as in a respective way. In that sense, I would agree with you that presidents of after the collapse of Soviet Union, from the US perspective, they were hoping to involve Russia in the international system to
so the reset with
the reset,
Clinton,
the involvement in Afghanistan, to taking Russia to the path to the democracy. But actually, the internal drivers of the political system in Russia was something that was a blocking element, because to strengthen Putin's position inside Russia, he had to find the enemy. So the West is the enemy, is something, and US are the primary enemy in the sense to see Russia as a big imperialistic, again, power. So US is the main rival, even if they are not partners. The rival like strengthen and rise the position of Russian Federation and Putin himself.
Vladimir Putin was very quick to launch a statement that, well, we can talk with President Trump, we can get things done. Is that just another stage in the long psychological war between these two powers? Or is there actually something, in your view, that he actually does want to negotiate over Ukraine?
Sure. I mean, both of them are kind of a transactional guys. And in that way, they are capable to have negotiations, and Putin will be more than happy to start negotiations directly with Trump, because that would show that we don't care about Europe. I mean, the Americans do not care about Europe, do not care about Ukraine. The superpower scans. This is the word that Putin is providing in the world, that the bigger are more important than others. We don't care. We don't take their attention. And the second thing is that this transactional approach can help Putin to actually win the war, because he would be happy to start negotiations and then prolong the negotiation and then maximize the requirements and do everything to show that to the whole world that he's a good guy. He wants to have a peace all over, especially Ukraine. But behind the scene, they want to at least change the situation on the front line, and they would lie about that we do not shoot Ukraine, we do not hit Ukraine. The different story will be behind these political peace negotiations.
One of the criticisms of Neville Chamberlain, for example, in his negotiations with Adolf Hitler, was that Neville Chamberlain was a man of contract. Adolf Hitler wasn't. It didn't matter anything that he signed up to. He could always break his word. It was just another stage in a grander plan. Whereas for Chamberlain, it was the signature on the deal, on the treaty, was sacrosanct. Is Trump that kind of a guy, or is he harder-headed, do you think? I know it's too early perhaps to say, but what's your view on that?
I mean, what we will see, that Trump on steroid, he would be definitely much more Trump than ever. I mean, comparing to the first presidency, because he has all the administration back, all the Congress, so he can do a lot. But at the same time, when I said that they both are transactional, I do see the problem with Americans' win-win situation. We will give you this and you will give, and deal will be done. While in Russia, you have transactional people because they do understand what kind of sphere of influence they can divide. However, the element of an imperialistic thing do not allow to just give up something, to go with the direction or the negotiations win-win situation. In Russia, you have either you lose, either you win. And in that sense, those two guys, the two men, can have a separate view on the deal, the peace deal, the peace negotiations, because definitely Trump would say, okay, the war is done, the war is over. While in Russia, the confrontation is, like, the war is part of the confrontation, because confrontation with the whole world allows Putin to say, we need to mobilize, everyone are against us, and we need to be strong inside. That's why you cannot complain on internal matters, but because from outside we have these enemies all over, especially US.
Yes, there seem to be two different philosophies emerging.
Definitely.
The object of the exercise, Ukraine, that doesn't seem to have any voice in the negotiations between these two men. I mean, Ukraine may not want to be carved up.
Yeah, sure. I mean, in the world pictured by Putin, smaller countries like Poland, Ukraine, and others do not count. They do not have any voice. They are only a subject of the politics, not the object one.
Yes.
So in that sense, that's why for Putin, the negotiations between Trump and Putin would be so crucial to at least break the political will of Ukrainians to stop fighting. Even Trump can do nothing to actually make Putin happy, because if Trump will decide or concentrate on different things like internal things or migration or immigration things that he prioritizes, then Ukraine will be left without Americans' weapon. Without it, they will be in very bad position actually to take what Russia will give them.
Back to the big boys' table, I suppose. Professor Legutska, thank you very much for coming on once more onto our programme.
Thank you again.
That's it. Do join us next time for How We Got Here.